Hi everyone, before we begin this week's Monday Minute, I wanted to let you know that Meredith and I have recorded another video which is about the 5 key takeaways about our book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. We go through all the core concepts that we cover in the book in about 20 minutes or so. It's only a brief overview, so you still have to get the book if you haven't read it. But if you'd like to check it out, please go to deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com/blog and you'll see that alongside all our other videos there. And while there, why don't you subscribe as well? Anyway, enjoy this week's Monday Minute and we'll speak to you soon.
30-minute free online ordering. Do QR codes have a future? And a restaurant lowering prices? That's all ahead on this week's Monday Minute. Monday Minute works like this. We talk about 5 headlines that have been frequenting the news across various different channels on restaurants, technology, and off-premise that in some way link back to our book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hey, Carl, good morning. I got
Morning,
first
Meredith.
question for you about Sweetgreen. They've added some gamification to their app, and I know you love gamification, so tell us what that means.
I do love gamification, especially on a national holiday. Happy 4th, everyone. Hope you're all having a happy Independence Day. Gamification. Gamification is something that we often talk about when we speak about Loyalty 3.0. Our friend Zach Goldstein over at Thanks often talks about how it potentially is going to be the way in which the future of loyalty plays out. And we also have friends over at Sweetgreen. And Sweetgreen have announced something just this last Monday about a program that they're going to be doing over the course of the next month, where they're giving their app users, their customers utilizing the Sweetgreen app, access to specific challenges. And these challenges then will reward them in some way. So they are doing things like order a side item and get a free beverage, spend $20 and get a $4 credit going forwards. I think it's a really interesting idea because ultimately, I think a lot of customers today are getting tired of collecting points or the punch card type approach. And sometimes they just want something a little bit different. Now, is the challenge of a promotional mechanic the right type of gamification? I don't know. I don't know whether that is going to be the way, but they've clearly said they're looking to test this. They're clearly wanting to see whether this is something that's going to resonate with their guests. One of the other interesting things about the article that I noticed here was that their proportion of digital orders has gone down in comparison to last year. So digital sales in the first quarter made up 66% of their revenue during the first quarter. By the way, amazing, 66%. Most people would bite their hands off for that. But last year, it was 77%. And don't forget, they also stopped their own loyalty program, their traditional loyalty program, back in March. So I think this is the launch, if you will, or the start of the launch of their new approach to loyalty. And it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Starbucks app and the stars. You and I have worked with folks in the past who are so obsessed with the stars that they have to be the person to place the Starbucks order to make sure they're getting the credit for it. They're drinking all kinds of crazy things that is not their normal order just to get those stars because they're following whatever it is that the app is telling them to do. And so I think for some people, it really works for sure. And that idea, not only that you can gain more stars for certain behaviors, but that the brand is telling you, hey, I think you'll like this. You should try this, particularly when those offers are personalized, I think has a huge amount of potential for any restaurant. So I'm excited to see what happens with Sweetgreen as they encourage solid behavior here.
You're right. Of course, when you get to understand which mechanic a particular customer moves towards, then you can actually repeat the mechanic back in front of them in the future. Absolutely. Okay, a second question, Meredith. Premium price seating is coming to restaurants. There's a Canadian company by the name of Tablz that's got 3.2 million Canadian dollars in funding this week. Tell us about them.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So I know you're all familiar with going to buy your airline ticket and having every single seat be a different price based on window, aisle, exit, how close to the front of the plane, legroom, etc. And that has become fairly standard, fairly normal in the airline industry. Of course, the best thing about having fees is that you can waive them for your most loyal customers. And certainly anyone who has a lot of status on any of the airlines is familiar with being able to pick any seat for free. Tablz is doing something very similar in the restaurant industry, which is making the best tables have a premium price when you go to make your reservation. This is something that today happens, I would say, indirectly, right? Either those of us who are early birds and call long before we're going, get the best tables, or maybe those of us who are really influential and great with words always get good tables, or maybe those of us who are willing to slip a 20 to the host get the great tables. This formalizes that practice that's been around forever and has that revenue coming straight to the actual restaurant so that people who are willing to pay for a particular or better table can get one. Now, Tablz is not the only company doing an idea like this in the industry. There's also Tuck, which has some of the most premium restaurants, independent restaurants out there on a reservation app where you can pay to reserve a spot. That's the beginning of going toward an idea like this. There's also a company called Truffle App that does something very similar to this in the sports bar space, allowing patrons and I guess I would say huge fans of particular teams to reserve a spot to watch their favorite team at that sports bar on a particular Sunday. So this works really well in any place where there is a very differentiated experience across the seating portfolio in a restaurant, but it also works very well in any case where there is extremely peaky demand. So something like a sports event based venue. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of uptake they get on this, but I expect that we'll see a lot more of this in restaurants going forward.
Have you ever slipped $20 to be able to get the seat that you're after? Have you ever done that? That's never worked for me. I'm just
You know how compliant I am. I would never do something like that.
Okay, I'm just checking.
All right, Carl, there's rumor out there that customers don't actually like QR codes. Is that true? And if so, does that spell the end for these little black and white dots?
Meredith, I never come to a conversation with you without some data, and this isn't just opinion. Technomic have undertaken a survey of 1,000 customers, and 88% of them have said they do not like QR codes. 88%. I think we've gone on record before saying QR codes make a lot of sense, but also the reality is they made a lot of sense specifically during the pandemic when many restaurants had to adapt very quickly. And a lot of them just went to a service where you could upload your PDF menu and then people would actually have access to it from there. But a PDF isn't mobile optimized. It's not a particularly great experience. You're not giving the customer, the guest, any extra experience when they have to engage with a PDF. And so I think there's a lot of that in those numbers. It isn't, by the way, when you were telling me earlier about an elderly member of your family that's having some fun with this on a recent trip, and I really thought they interviewed 1,000 old folks, but actually the stats across this were consistent across many different generations. In fact, 82% of millennials said they would prefer a paper menu over a QR code. So where does this leave us? I think it leaves us in a place of saying, perhaps QR codes came a bit early because of the pandemic, because a number of the other aspects of the ordering process still need to have some level of improvement. So that clearly means having a mobile optimized interface to be able to get to a place where you can have payments seamlessly completed, which of course we're seeing through many different players like Toast out there today that are doing that. But I also think there's something about this piece that has yet to come. And that is, if you sit down at a restaurant and your phone automatically knows who you are, your menu can be customized for you. It can actually recognize who you are. It can recognize what you've purchased before. It can give you an experience that no paper menu or no physical server can give you. So I think that is where things will head. And that's where the QR code will ultimately provide better level of value for a customer that today, clearly, it's more work for them because labor is still a challenge. And we've got to remember that having a interface with a QR code, an online menu, the ability to order through an online menu, the ability to pay through an online menu, all of those things are helping ease the labor crisis. So customers, guests might have to get used to this, even though they perhaps might not like it. But I refer you back to, I don't think he ever actually said this, but he's often acclaimed to it. Henry Ford, when he talked about people with the car, I think he said, when he introduced the idea of it to a bunch of potential customers, they said, no, we want faster horses. So maybe this is the equivalent of that for the restaurant.
I think that's true. I think you're exactly right. It's the experience on the back end of the QR code that people hate. And if you were to really dig deep in that, they would say, a PDF menu is impossible to read on my phone. And I would much rather just have a piece of paper. But if instead you gave them an outstanding digital experience on the back end of that QR code, they wouldn't care how they got there.
Yeah. Okay, our fourth question this week is a restaurant that is doing something rather unusual. They're lowering prices in a year of record inflation. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is Mighty Quinns, which has several units in the New York City area, and they have gone out with a big splash saying that they are reducing prices because protein prices have come down off their high. And speaking as someone who used to run pricing at Taco Bell, I would say it is very difficult to reduce prices. And the reason why is because consumers don't give you credit for it, right? So you reduce menu prices across the board, most consumers will never notice because they don't come into the restaurant that often. And if they do come into the restaurant and they happen to notice, maybe they'll come back more often, but not enough to make up for all the folks that you lost as prices were increasing. So it's very difficult to do, and good on Mighty Quinns, first of all, doing it, because I think fair's fair. As they said, if you're going to take prices up when protein prices go up, why wouldn't you take them down when protein prices go down? And because number two, they did such a great job of announcing it to the public, of having this big PR push so that people are aware that they are doing this, which hopefully will give them the credit for it and bring more restaurant visits back in. Now, this goes along with an article that was in Restaurant Business talking about a recent survey that Morning Consult put out saying that 8 in 10 customers are reducing their restaurant visits because of inflation. So consumers are actually changing behavior. They are modifying where they go, how often they go, in order to accommodate what are rising prices against essentially a fixed wage, right? It can't go on forever. And they coupled in Restaurant Business that survey with some data from Placer.ai, which is keeping track of where consumers are actually going based on their mobile phone traffic. And they have found that indeed visits, in particular to fine dining and higher end restaurants, places like Mighty Quinns, have been declining, whereas visits at places like QSR have been going up. So not only are consumers reducing their overall restaurant visits, when they do go, they're trading down to things that are slightly less expensive. I think this is an incredible development. I'm so excited to see what happens with Mighty Quinns and if others follow suit. All right, last question. More great deals out in the market, Carl. This one's about Lunchbox. They've announced that Lunchbox Essentials is giving independent restaurants free access. Tell us about that.
They announced it in quite a lunchbox type fashion as well. They had this huge sign over Times Square saying food, not fees.com, and really impressive kind of visual to announce the launch of Lunchbox Essentials. They have often been talking about the importance of helping restaurants have their own channel for digital ordering. They're not the biggest fans, I'd say, of the marketplaces. But the thing that I really like about it is they've always had that kind of independent front and center of their mind. And I think this particular product launch is really helping independents because it's only for restaurants of 3 locations or fewer. Okay, so that's the important thing. Now, it does give those restaurants access to digital ordering. It gives them access to marketing. It gives them access to loyalty, much like many of their core customers. By the way, they have 2,500 core customers already since their launch in 2019. But it doesn't allow those customers to get access to the app. They don't have an app through this, but which independents really need an app? I don't think many would, quite honestly. And it doesn't allow any integration to the restaurant's POS. But one of the things that I think is also a feature is it can be set up within 30 minutes or less. Imagine that we could call up our independent restaurant friends and get them onto this program within 30 minutes. That's a real win there, I think. And if we're able to help independents get a foot on the ladder, if you will, onto the digital maturity path that you and I are writing our bonus chapter on right now, then I think that's going to help the industry at large. Will this solution be something that ultimately broadens it out to other things? Absolutely. I'm sure they'll add on additional features that do end up costing those independents in some way. But it's a great way for Lunchbox to be able to get some volume because they have plans to grow their network base by thousands by the end of the year. And when you're offering something for free with the features I mentioned and a setup time of 30 minutes or less, it's perhaps a very ambitious but realistic target to go after. So well done to Nabil.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant customer acquisition strategy, right? Because who doesn't want something that's free? And we're all familiar in the consumer app market of a freemium model where we get on something, we get the basics, we start to get, we're hooked into it, and we go, oh, I would like to add that on. I would like that feature. I would like to be able to do this, that, or the other thing. And all of a sudden, there we are, paying subscription member of that app. So I think it's a very brilliant use of funds to acquire customers into the system that hopefully eventually for them will become paying customers. And if not, in the meantime, benefit a whole bunch of independent restaurants.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it for this week's Monday Minute. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the articles. Shout out to Restaurant Business. 4 out of the 5 articles this week were found through you guys. So good job to Joe, Heather and team. Thank you for that as always. And if you guys have got any questions, any comments, things you agree with, disagree with, please leave them in the comments below. Please put your recommendations for future articles to us, of course. But until next time, thanks for watching and we'll speak to you soon.
The Monday Minute is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on all our social media Learn Delivery channels. Thanks for listening.